Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the Skinny Atlas Festival and to SkanFest U. This is the fourth and final session we've been having together on music and nature. And whether you've come to all four or are here for the first time, we're very glad that you've joined us. We have a very special way to finish today. We have two special guests, both our tenor for the week. Nicholas Pahn is here to perform some Schubert for you, a song which is intimately connected with nature. And we also have a wonderful musician, Curtis Waterman, who is from the Onondaga Nation, and he's going to share some of his music to you today and speak about music and nature. And that's going to end with a food tasting of Onondaga food, which you may not have had before. I have not, so it's very generous of Curtis to do this, and we're so happy that both of them are here. Yes. So before I introduce to you our guests, just a brief recap of what we've been going over these last couple of weeks. We've been looking at the ways in which music and nature are connected with each other or can be connected. Of course, that's up to the music itself and the composer who writes the music. We saw that certainly music is able to make the sounds of nature. Many instruments are created with the materials of nature, whether it's wood. They can make the sounds of birds. We saw that the piano was very effective at creating the sounds of water. We heard music last week by Maurice Ravel called Playing with Water. We know that music can conjure an atmosphere more generally, even without imitating a particular sound of nature. And last week in particular, we looked into the music of Franz Liszt and how he tries to focus more on the feelings that one gets when one goes into nature, maybe even the wisdom that one can find when one searches in nature, whether it's through solitude and the way that nature is able to summon within us thoughts and feelings in particular. So we've been going into that. And later in the class today, we're going to widen our view a little bit and look at some modern perspectives, consider how musicians are treating climate change and considering how nature has changed and also advocating for what we can do about that. And most especially, we're going to be looking into also the Native American perspective on music. We have this week with us the Chickasaw composer Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate, who actually was interviewed this morning on NPR and Morning Edition. I don't know if any of you heard that. That is wonderful. He'll be here in a couple of days to share his music. And there is a pre-concert talk with him on Thursday as well. So lots of perspectives this week. I'm going to go back to start today to the Eurocentric view of nature, which I would argue is still today grounded in Romanticism. It starts with the recognition in nature of mystery, of unknown forces out in the universe. And I'd say there was a loss in faith in universal order through the Enlightenment when we go into the Romantic period, and a gain in faith in art, in literature, and most of all in nature, and the power of subjectivity, of an individual perspective. That's very important to Romanticism. And in nature, we can learn about ourselves, about the human, about who we are, and the song we'll hear in just a moment is an excellent representation of that. But we find that even in the paintings we've been looking at to connect to what musicians are doing. Sometimes it's helpful to find currents in painting as well. And we find painters looking in nature and finding that it seems to them that nature has almost human characteristics to it. This painting is an interesting one. This is by Caspar David Friedrich, the German Romantic painter, called The Lonely Tree. Now, is this tree actually lonely? Probably not, right? But when we see it, we are reminded of what it feels like to be alone or lonely on our own, right? And so somehow the experience of nature then reflects back on our own experiences, thoughts, feelings, and we may even gain wisdom out of seeing a tree like this or experiencing it. And so a lot of paintings from this time period look into nature, and they have a human presence, but the focus is really on what can I learn from nature and what mysteries does it hold? And so we're going to hear a song which is set to poetry by Wilhelm Müller. He was a romantic poet in the time of Schubert. When Schubert set his poetry, these poems were new. They were the latest thing to come out. And Müller was very influenced by some of the great romantic poets like Goethe, for example, Eichendorff. And he was active in a circle of writers in Berlin, Germany, that included Wilhelm Hensel, the painter, who was the, well, how do I explain this? He would marry the sister of Felix Mendelssohn, pictured here, Louise Hensel, and the three of them got together at a party, and Müller was actually quite enamored, maybe even in love with Louise Hensel. And so the three of them, and there were a couple others, including a composer at that time, tried to create a little, what they called a Liederspiel, which is a kind of little play with music about a kind of a love triangle. There's a miller, a young protagonist, who sings these songs. There is the daughter of the older miller who is employing this young man, and he falls in love with her. Does she love him back? Well, you learn the answer to that by the end of the song cycle, but we don't know yet in the song that you're about to hear. And then later in the story, there's going to be a hunter, and he's more charismatic than the young miller, it turns out, according to the miller's daughter. So, spoiler alert there. But anyways, there's this triangle, and it's based in autobiography, since Müller was actually, speaking about himself to some degree, and the fact that Müller means miller and is also his name, this young miller, is probably not a coincidence either. Now, just a word about Schubert. Schubert got a hold of these songs, and he wrote 20 of them in all, and they form what's called a cycle. So there's an ongoing story or through line or plot through these. And if you can imagine what it was like to actually hear these songs for the first time, here's a wonderful drawing by Moritz von Schwind, who was a close friend of Schubert's. It was made long after Schubert died, but he really knew Schubert and was there when these songs were sung. And these are all actually real people that they knew. Schubert is sitting at the piano. He's a little hard to find, but he's got the glasses on. He's looking down at his hands at the keys, and the court tenor, Johann Michael Vogel, is singing here. And just look at how the people are when they're listening. Any observations compared to what a concert is like today, for example? What can you tell about the listening experience here? Yes?
It's much more communal.
Yes, they're very close together, aren't they? Yeah. They're very close together. Yes? Okay, so that's another interesting thing. They're very close together, but they're not looking at each other. So there's both a closeness and an intimacy, but there's also the way they're listening is more individual. They're off in their own worlds. Each one is kind of looking off into the direction. And that seems to reflect how people listened to music at this particular moment in time, in Schubert's circle of friends. So the music is both close, it's intimate, but it's also reflective. It's also something you reflect on your own. And that's typically romantic. So Nicholas Pun has graciously agreed to sing one of these songs for you, and I'm going to invite him on the stage now. Welcome. Welcome back to Skinny Atlas. You were with us several years ago, and I'm so thrilled that you're here not only to sing with the Jasper Quartet on Friday, but also tomorrow to sing this glorious song cycle by Schubert. And I think you might be willing to introduce this song or say a word about it.
This is song number 6 from Shona Millerin, The Cycle of 20. And I think a good translation for it is the impatient one. Our young hero, our romantic hero here, is he's walking around and he's met this woman, the miller's daughter, that he's so taken with. And he's desperate to know, basically, does she like me? And he says, I'm not gonna ask the flowers, I'm not gonna ask the stars, because I'm not an astronomer, I'm not a gardener, but I am a miller, and I've got my trusty friend here, the brook, who is this friend that kind of follows him throughout the entire story. And so he says, I'm gonna ask this little brook here that's been guiding me on my path all this time, does she like me? And I'm sure the answer will be there. And I mean, of course it's a brook, so it's not really talking back to him, as you can imagine. And he says, he realizes just one word is gonna make or break him. Is the word yes, or is the word no? And I don't know, the opening of it, the piano writing is actually quite beautiful. It asks a bunch of questions with me, right? And then eventually, once we get to I'm gonna turn to the brook, Aaron will play this very flowing, beautiful 16th note situation that sounds like my friend that does not have words. Exactly. So we'll try this, and I'll put this mic somewhere here.
Keinen Stern, sie können mir alle nicht sagen, was ich für so gern. Ich bin ja auch kein Gärtner, die Sterne stehen zu hoch. Mein Bächlein will ich sagen, ob mich mein Herz verlog. O Bächlein meiner Liebe, wie bist du so stumm? Will ja nur eines wissen, mein Wörtchen und ein Wörtchen ja, heißt das eine Wörtchen, das andere heißt nein. Die beiden Wörtchen schließen die ganze Welt mir ein. Die beiden Wörtchen schließen die ganze Welt mir ein. O Bächlein meiner Liebe, wie bist du wunderlich, will sie nur weiter sagen, sag, Bächlein, liebt sie mich, sag, Bächlein, liebt sie mich.
Thank you so much for sharing that tidbits. And there are 19 other songs to enjoy as the young Miller befriends this brook and asks it questions. Of course, it hopes for a certain answer, but the answer it hopes for doesn't always turn out in the end. But it's full of natural imagery, this song cycle. And again, it gets at the heart of Romanticism, which is not only expressing your feeling and your individual perspective, but again, searching for answers. It's an active stance towards life where you constantly are looking, searching, and nature is a big part in that. Before I introduce Curtis to you, I would like to move more to a modern frame of mind, because one of the things that's happened as we get into the 20th century with nature is that scientists have come to understand it a whole lot better than they did in the 19th century. We heard the other night a wonderful pre-concert talk with Professor Charles Driscoll from Syracuse University, who spoke a bit about the history of Onondaga Lake and pollution and restoration. Composers more recently have started to see whether music could reflect some of the advances in science and the understanding of nature from scientific perspectives. And as musical techniques have developed into the 20th century, composers have started to use those newer musical techniques to try to match up with the science and the understanding of nature. And so we find composers using a lot of patterned repetition, since nature is full of replication and patterns, right? But also the use of music as a process, just as nature has within it many processes which are going on. So the emphasis goes a bit away from the Romantic era, where you have these beautiful melodies that represent the solo individual, right? That the one person who's feeling something as a result, and really going more for a reflection of what's actually happening within nature from a scientific perspective. One of the composers who've really done amazing work on that, we're not going to hear his music because he writes mostly for massive, giant orchestra, John Luther Adams. Adams has taken an interest in how music can connect with nature. That's really his main goal, I think, for music in many of his works. He received the Pulitzer Prize for a work called Become Ocean, which addresses climate change in particular. The term become ocean, is a bit apocalyptic in that, the land is literally disappearing as the ocean levels rise. And looking at how music might reflect some of those processes as they're going on. So he treats the orchestra in giant waves of sound, and each section is maybe doing something, and those different sections cross each other, kind of like in a geologic sense, almost like tectonic plates, or the ocean, the bottom of the ocean. And so I wanted to play just a fragment of his work. It's a 40-minute work with no pause. So it's one giant process, and it's hard to give you a sense of it, although you can certainly listen to it on your own. So I'm just going to play a fragment from this large-scale work called Become Ocean. little bit, again, of Become Ocean by John Luther Adams. Any reactions to how this music has you listen to it? What are you hearing? Yes? Churning, yes, like the waves under the ocean or even beneath the surface of the earth. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes.
That's very aggressive quality. It's like there's this force that's coming
Yes.
to perhaps drown
Yeah.
continents, and then the volume increases, and it's like we're near destruction.
Yeah. Yeah, we hear how massive these forces are that govern nature. Sometimes we try to limit them. We see one tree, oh, how pretty that is, or the flower. But there are these large forces behind nature which are vast and larger than any one of us. And we feel that, and we might even feel a little bit of fear, right, out of that. And of course, these processes are changing, and that does give us some fear. So it's not all positive, but there's also beauty in it on some level. Yeah, any other reactions? Yes?
Intensity.
Yeah, there's this kind of quiet intensity of this churning underneath. Yes?
Disturbing.
Yeah, there might be an element of disturbing qualities there as well. Yes, one more?
It sounded like waves to me.
Waves.
Crescendo.
Yeah.
We got really loud. That felt very chaotic.
Yes.
And then it got quiet.
Yeah, we think of these large, thank you, yes, chaotic and of the waves.
I have a question.
Yes.
Let's listen to a small fraction.
Yes.
Is that just like this, or is it?
That's a good question. So, in a sense, it is just like that for 40 minutes. Now there are changes that happen, and the harmony keeps shifting, but the continuity is there throughout. There are no rests, essentially, throughout the piece. Yes.
Was this played in stereo?
It's played on the little speaker that we have.
I have that singular one speaker.
Yes.
It might be quite different in stereo.
Yes.
And different parts of the orchestra.
You're right about that. Yeah, that's right. Actually, the recording by the Seattle Symphony won the Grammy for best recording. So yeah, if you have a good stereo system at home, it might be quite fascinating to listen to it. Before I turn the floor over to Curtis, just one more little excerpt of a work that we're going to hear on Friday night this week by the Canadian composer Vivian Fung. And she wrote a song cycle called Lamenting Earth, which does directly address climate change through a series of poems, some of which are by very young people, aged 12 to 18. But the central poem that she uses is by a poet, Claire Wammenholm, which was written in 2020. And the poem is called O, and it uses words with the letter O. It's a prose poem, so it actually does look like this. Almost every word has an O, and many of the O's come from nature. O is for opus, the Orphean warbler's octaves, the oratorio of orioles. So you can see it has some musical language combined with orioles, the bird, for example, the ospreys, ostentation, the owl, and so forth. And it starts with this beautiful collection of images from nature. But as the poem proceeds, it starts to address the fact that nature is struggling under the pressure of human behavior. So later in the poem, once the oxbows were not overrun with nitrogen. O is for the muscles opening in the ocean's oven. O for the rising ozone, the dropping oxygen, for the algae overblooming, like an omen or an oracle. Now, some of us know that algae bloom is like one of our main worries on the lake, on all the lakes around here, as the temperature rises. So it addresses both the beauty of nature, but also some of the effects of climate change, which are concerning artists today. So I thought I'd play a little excerpt. Fortunately, I have a video of Nicholas Pon, our tenor, performing here with the Jasper Quartet. So here's a little bit of Lamenting Earth. Okay, I realize it's rather intense. But I don't want to shy away from that aspect of nature too, and our understanding of it. We've heard many beautiful pieces in this class, but I think composers and artists are looking to understand nature in many different ways through music. Any reactions to what you're hearing in this particular case, or what it makes you, again, think or feel?
Yes. For me, it was some foreboding first, and then like a descent into something you do not understand.
Yeah, thank you. You hear that descending. Again, there's a process happening, right? And it seems inexorable. Yeah. Yes.
I think also, if you accept climate change, many of us children really think that it's something that we have to deal with right now. I think that whole perspective, when you listen to music, that influenced how I heard that. It sounded so ominous.
Yeah, there's something ominous there. Yeah. Thank you.
Repeat what she said.
Yes, she was saying that it did seem to help her think about climate change in particular and the effects of that. And there is something ominous that we feel, even as we search for technology and ways of reforming our behavior in order to preserve our environment. Yeah. Yes.
It felt very melancholy,
Okay. Yes, the descent.
That was to me like somebody screaming as they fell in love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were screaming.
Yeah. Yeah, you can hear that when it goes up high and then the music descends that way. Yeah. Yes. Susan?
When I listen to traditional music,
Yes.
there's usually a line that I follow.
Yes.
And I can depend on the fact that it's probably going to be a theme
Mhm.
variation.
Yes.
Or somehow, but this doesn't have a line like that at all. It's just
Yes.
seems to be, round.
Yes.
Low.
That's right.
Right, yes. We discussed that last week in reference to Ravel's music called Playing with Water, that there was no real melody, that the composer was more interested in texture or the how the sounds blend together rather than that one solo individual line. And I think that composers in doing that seek to reflect nature itself, which has many different things happening all at the same time, which come together into one large process. Right, so it's a way of helping to depict nature in a way that might be a little more realistic, perhaps, but requires a bit of a different way of listening. So thank you for your open-mindedness in that regard.
Yes. Final.
When he screams, basically.
Yes.
Very melodic.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, where did I hear that before? Oh, yeah, Don Giovanni.
Uh-huh.
He's doomed.
Mm-hmm.
He's
At
got
the
to go
end.
with Satan. And,
Yeah.
and he made that same
Mhm.
scream.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's over.
Yeah. 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 So the music, in a way, is telling us to wake up and do something.
But yeah, but I mean, the fact that we evoked something from a few centuries ago,
Mm-hmm.
and yet it's so current,
Mm-hmm.
was kind of cool.
I think that's what a lot of musicians, composers are trying to do, is both to connect to the tradition of music and to say something about our time, our contemporary issues, and the way we live now in order to connect with us. So thank you for listening to those excerpts. I want to reserve the rest of the time for Curtis. I'm so grateful that he's here. How many of you came to the Baltimore Woods Nature Walk? A couple. Oh, wonderful. Okay, so you already have some fans among us because you heard Curtis play outside and heard the beautiful sound of his flutes, his wooden flutes, which he's going to share with us today. And I asked Curtis if he might speak a little bit with us about nature in his culture, but then, of course, to share some songs and stories with us as a musician today. So please welcome Curtis Waterman. As he's going to get set up here, he's brought several different flutes. We heard a few of those the other day. And Curtis, I don't know if you'd be willing to tell us a little bit about your background and also maybe how you got into music.
Okay. First, I must say, Nyawa Skano Swagwigi, Hanagayaki, Nyawa Wagay Satan, Tahindiak, Gaye Wanukske, Ngesta. What I said was basically the minimum that I need to say when I meet the Creator. I have to say that in order to get in. So I make sure I say and know that much. Basically what I said was, welcome. I'm thankful that you are well. My name is Curtis Waterman. That's my English name. My native name is Tahindiak, and it means he who stirs up things. But the connotation is soil. I'm Beaver Clan of the Longhouse side of the Onondaga Nation. So welcome, I'm honored to be here. As mentioned, I play the flute, I'm a musician. I also play in and have played in many bands around the Syracuse area. And in those bands, I play the harmonica, which is something I will play for you at the end. And with both of those instruments, the intent is to communicate with your audience, to share a feeling. And I always say the basis of what I'm playing here is it's a pentatonic scale, which lends itself to the blues side of things. And having said that, you don't just play the blues. You have to use a mechanism of putting yourself into a place where you can feel something of your past that is not a good thing. But then you well up that feeling inside of you to play. And then that feeling gets portrayed to the audience, if you do it well. And then the audience gets it. And that's where that communication happens, because it comes back. And you can actually feel it as you're playing. And some people call it nirvana. But it's a definite feeling, and it is real. And it's a fleeting feeling, because when it does happen, I just want to keep it going. Because if you don't, it's gone. So, having said that, you mentioned the connection with nature. I'm Haudenosaunee. I'm a couple hills over this way, and I'm glad that you're trying to get this relationship going. I know some faces from different times in the past, but I'm glad that you're trying to start that communication again. I don't want to go too far into it because I only have 10 minutes or so, but yeah, I want to get into the flute story, but first I wanted to, the nature aspect of it. My clan is a beaver. There are 9 clans in the Haudenosaunee culture, and every one of them is a bird or animal of some sort. And back in the beginning, the peacemaker told a prospective chief to go into the woods and find an animal and come back and tell me what that animal was. So as a consequence, 9 chiefs went out and they found and saw 9 different animals. And those are the animals of the 9 clans within the Haudenosaunee territory. And with the advent of Google and Siri, you can look up those 9 animals. So I won't tell you what they are other than I'm Beaver, and we are the workers of the group. So one more thing about my culture, which my grandmother told me when I was very little. Not only do you have to say what I just said to get in to the Creator's land, but it's a lot easier to get in if he sees you as he who helps. So you have to help each other. And if you're a big helper, could be small, could be big, if you help, he sees that as like, yes, come in, come on in. So, I'm trying to think of anything else that you need me to say, or that's okay. Also, talking about technology, the flute here, the story of the flute, I will, there's a few stories. The flute is like Midwestern origin. Over here in the eastern woodlands, we had drums and rattles. That's kind of what we used, along with the native voice during ceremonies. So the flute didn't come over here until later on. But the story of Out West kind of goes to, you mentioned the hunter was like the big strong guy. And the story kind of goes that same way. A hunting party set out to go hunting, and in that group was this young man who wasn't really a strong hunter, wasn't strong physically. He was like the last one to get picked whenever you needed something to happen, kind of like the last one to get picked on a softball team or dodgeball, whatever, in school. And needless to say, some of the women didn't pick him either when it came time for that to happen. So he went on the hunt with these guys, and lo and behold, he gets lost. He doesn't know where the other hunters are, and nighttime is coming. He's wandering around in the woods, doesn't know where he is, so he has to lay down and go to sleep because it's nighttime. So he slept all night, and in the morning, the wind was blowing, and he heard this strange noise, and the pitch kind of changed. And he was like, what is that? And he followed his ears until he got close enough to where he could see where the noise was coming from. And it was coming from this branch on a cedar tree. And he got closer and he looked at the branch, and the branch had, number one, it had holes in it where woodpeckers had made the holes. But the inside was hollow, where the insects had hollowed out the inside of that branch. And as the wind blew in different directions, different tones and sounds came out of that branch. So he was like, oh my God, listen to that. So he carefully cut down the branch at the trunk of the tree, and he looked at it, and he tried to make the same noises that the wind was making, and he couldn't. But he stayed in the woods until he figured out how he could make that branch make noises like the wind did, which he did. And as the story goes, it didn't say how long it took him, but he did make it sound like the wind. So now he's all happy with himself, and he heads back to his home, his nation, his tribe, and he's playing this branch that he found. And as he's coming into the village, the women hear this noise. They're like, what is that? And, oh my God, it's beautiful. And the women start coming out, and the women start following him. And he notices the women, and he's like, oh my God, this never happened before. So he continues to play, and he tries to play as pretty as he could. Tried to put as much emotion as he could into what he was doing, because those women, they were liking it. So that's pretty much the end of the story, in that the flute, based on that story, the men used the flute to attract women. And of course, the more beautifully you played it, the more women came around, and I guess you were happy at that point. So I was asked to play this flute. We were talking in the old times, in the old days, way back. I'll play it acoustically, and with the invention of amplifiers, digital delay, I'll play that also, because these things up here help me give you that, what I call that canyon sound, that echo, as though I was playing in a canyon. And the canyon, the one where you can yell and your voice comes back, that echo, That's what I'm trying to get with this here, this apparatus here. But first I'll play it just as is. Probably, I'll try to play it like the way that gentleman did way back. Now, as you saw Aaron with all his technology, let me see if I can get my technology to work here. one more little treat. They mentioned I was a musician. I think I mentioned I'm a musician. I've actually played down here. There was a bar right in the main street down here that's no longer there. I've played there many times with the band the Gunstermacher band. We played there. So I've also played down at the winery down here, Aurelius, or whatever that name is. Starts with an A. I played there. So I played the harmonica in these bands, and I'm going to use the same backing track to show you and to help share an emotion with you. Thank you. Hopefully you caught the little drift that I was trying to give you there. So, anything else?
We so appreciate your being here and sharing your story, your music, and your emotion with us today. And I believe you brought some food to share as well. Would you be willing to say just a word about that?
Well, there is a little bit of a story in that I brought corn soup and what we call hot scones. And the part of the story of the corn soup was it's made, originally it was made out of corn, hominy, which is what we had, and kidney beans, which is what we had. And the protein part of it was basically anything that the hunters brought back. You guess whatever it is. It was going to go into that soup. It could even be fish. But during the Depression, some of that got scarce. The men went off to war. And so the women had to use kind of what was around. Certainly there wasn't much money around during the Depression, but there was salt pork that was around. And salt pork, as you know, didn't necessarily spoil readily. So salt pork became cut up into little bite-sized pieces and basically boiled in the soup. So to this day, that is the protein in that soup. There's variations in the corn, in the Seneca people. They burn the corn. There's a couple ways. You can burn it with the husk on it and let the husk kind of burn off and the kernels get a little charred. Or you can just take the kernels, the dried kernels, and brown them in a frying pan like you would pine nuts or something like that. And then you make your corn soup, which gives it a nice smoky flavor. So after the Depression kind of things got better, some of the people are saying, why are we still putting salt pork in our corn soup? And the answer is, well, because it tastes good. So obviously you don't need to put salt pork in there if you're a vegetarian. You can, like anything, you can take the meat out and it becomes vegetarian, vegan, even if you're going that direction. And then going back to the flour, you probably heard like some of these Western tribes, they got flour, federally subsidized food. So based on the flour and water, they made fried bread. So we kind of inherited that over on this side because we got subsidized also back in the day. And we didn't make fried bread, we made what we called hot scones, which is a thicker bread. These ones though are they're nice little round like pucks, I would call them. And but my aunt would come in and she would make a dough and basically flour, salt, baking powder, some eggs and water. You could put canned milk or dried milk in there if you want to. And she would fill that frying pan right up to the top and it would cook and she would turn it over and then when it was done, she basically cut it like a pizza. And then so as kids, we'd get a wedge about that thick. And then, of course, we would cut it in half and put butter on it and peanut butter and strawberry preserves or something like that on it. And that would go with the corn soup. So those are the two stories of what I brought. Certainly, like I was saying, if you're vegetarian, then certainly indulge into the little hot scones that are in there. As time went on, some of the people they get the little hot dogs like that, the little that you can buy in a store, and they'll wrap that dough around it, and we call those scone dogs. So, but yeah, I just wanted to say one thing on that music that you played that got kind of louder and louder and louder. Somebody mentioned fear in the audience, and that's kind of what came to me. It reminded me of when I was little. It was nighttime, and I was going to my grandmother's house, and it was like the closer I got to sanctuary, the louder the fear got in my head. So that noise, that sound was like the fear that was coming. And I finally got to the door, and made it inside. But that was my recollection of that sound. So, so thank you.
Thank you again to Curtis, and please join us in the lobby to try some of the food. Thank you to all of you for your time and attention throughout this reflection on the relationship between music and nature. If you're interested in reading more about that, I would recommend this book as a series of essays by many different writers on the topic of music and nature. That's published by Cambridge University Press. Thank you, everyone, and see you out for some food.